We are being unnecessarily hindered by a carbon score that doesn't make sense.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the State of Soy. We're coming to you from outside Perry, Iowa, in the beautiful western Iowa countryside, kind of the western part of our central Iowa area. And I'm visiting with Ron Heck. Ron is a farmer, longtime state, national, and I would even say having an international influence on soybean, and you've always made it your mission to make soybeans a better crop. And that's why we're out here having a conversation, Ron, about soybeans, the role it's playing in the biofuels market. We all know that it's directly tied to the price that soybean farmers are receiving for their crop, and at the heart of that is the carbon intensity scoring behind the crop and how it then measures up in the biofuels industry. The carbon intensity scoring is really hindering the soybean industry's ability to grow in the renewable fuel space.
Yeah, you're right. We are being unnecessarily hindered by a carbon score that doesn't make sense. The numbers used are too old with lower yields, don't reflect no-till, don't reflect the value of the protein crop. Soybeans are 80% protein. The numbers were not good. They were inaccurate when they were first put in place 20 years ago. Since then, yields and farming practices have improved. Protein meal remains in high demand, and that's why we plant the soybeans. But the scores haven't changed. We still suffer an unnecessary carbon penalty. And when fuel is being used to earn carbon credits, that has the effect of shutting us out of marketplaces where we really rightfully should be a leader.
And that holds true whether it's domestically in places like California, whether it's on the international stage in terms of the feedstocks that are used to make biofuels. The carbon intensity, which is really, I would say, the axle of this issue. What maybe is a short-term and then maybe a longer-term play, Ron, in terms of making progress on that front to the benefit of the soybean farmer?
In the short term, we should be making a lot of noise and insisting on new updated carbon scores that reflect the reality of the situation. Some of these scores are 20 years old. All of the scores reflect an indirect land use charge, which is just plain wrong. Since 2000, the rest of the world has increased their farm acres 400 million acres. The U.S. only has 340 million acres in farmland. So the rest of the world has had a huge indirect land use change. But when they bring in imports, they're not assessed an indirect land use charge, partly because of poor documentation. And the Treasury Department is investigating for fraud right now on some of those things. In the same time period, since 2000, the United States has reduced acres and farms by 4 million acres. So if we've reduced our acres that are farming and other countries have increased theirs, why don't we have a carbon score that accurately says we don't have indirect land use? Because we don't.
For farmers who are heading to the fields, what is your counsel to them, Ron? What's your call to action to them? What should they be doing on this issue, given that, depending on the assessment or the study, this issue is having as much as $1.30 per bushel impact negatively on revenue opportunities for the soybean farmer?
Absolutely, $1.30 a bushel just since January 2nd of this year, and upwards of $3 if you go back to the peak in soybean oil in 2022. Yes, it's $1.30 a bushel penalty for the lower soybean oil prices. The lower soybean oil prices are a result of inaccurate carbon intensity scores that incentivize used cooking oil imports, especially into the West Coast. So we have the farmers losing $1.30 a bushel on the soybeans, and the taxpayers are subsidizing imported used cooking oil on the West Coast, all because the carbon scores are inaccurate.
And so really it's farmers need to be reaching out, raising their voice on this issue and demanding that we revisit really the impetus for what we now know to be a very, very flawed approach, and that's probably putting it mildly, on the carbon intensity scoring as it relates to soy.
It's backwards. Yep. But we are reducing our acres but paying an indirect land use charge, and the foreign imports are coming in without that.
It's always good to get your take, Ron. Thank you for all you've done to make the soybean a better crop, and we'll continue to do that. Reporting for this edition of the State of Soy, I'm Aaron Putsey.
My name is Charlie Brunker, and my wife and I and our kids run Precision Ag, try to be on the cutting edge every time we can. We turned on FMH, Precision Ag, crop insurance. We harnessed what we're already doing, and we'll never look back. Grandpa used to call a field, 100 acres, and now we're planting 90 of the 100 acres. Well, we're only paying for the 90 that we plant, and those details actually increased our APHs anywhere from 5 to 12% in the first year.